Very interesting. We'll talk a bit more about BRICS and also about how the United States of America views China's increasing trade relations with South America. Do continue to stay on with this. Meanwhile, this is how the United States of America is reported to have captured Nicolas Maduro, where a senator from the U.S. Republican Party, Mike Lee, has now said that Nicolas Maduro was apparently arrested by U.S. personnel. Now, Mike Lee claims that the Venezuelan president will now stand trial for criminal charges in the United States of America. Now, the United States says that Nicolas Maduro leads a drug cartel. It's called the Cartel de los Soles, which translates to Cartel of the Suns. The name is, of course, derived from the sun insignia that is used by Venezuelan generals on their uniforms instead of the traditional stars. The U.S. has charged Nicolas Maduro with drug trafficking and what it has described as narco-terrorism. In March 2020, this was during Donald Trump's first presidential term, the Trump administration had put a bounty of $15 million on Nicolas Maduro's head. When Nicolas Maduro won the disputed elections in early January 2025, the outgoing Joe Biden administration had raised the bounty on Nicolas Maduro to $25 million. And then on the 7th of August in 2025, the second Trump administration doubled that bounty to $50 million American dollars. Now, the American Attorney General Pam Bondi has accused Nicolas Maduro of collaborating with other drug cartels like the Tren de Aragua and the Sinaloa cartel. The Trump administration had already designated these drug cartels as foreign terror groups. And finally, effective from the 24th of November 2025, the so-called Cartel of the Suns was also designated as a foreign terror organization that was headed by Nicolas Maduro. The United States has explicitly stated that Nicolas Maduro, the president of the sovereign nation of Venezuela, was the head of a narco-terror group. And now it seems that Maduro's capture has paved the way for the United States to imprison him on charges of drug trafficking and terrorism. Nicolas Maduro had served as the president of Venezuela since April 2013. When he had taken over the presidency in the aftermath of the death of Venezuela's long-time, another very hugely popular leader, Hugo Chavez. Now, before rising to power, Nicolas Maduro had reportedly worked as a bus driver and then as a trade union leader before eventually ending up as the president of Venezuela. So these, of course, are some of the developments where it's now becoming increasingly clear as to what the Americans intend to do with Nicolas Maduro, who, remember, has a $50 million bounty on his head. Now that he's been captured, the Americans, it appears, will try him on charges of narco-trafficking and terror. Mr. Pitlow, what has happened in the case of Nicolas Maduro calls into question about the relevance of international law. Now, Nicolas Maduro was the head of a sovereign nation. The Americans put a bounty on his head, accused him of narco-trafficking and also of heading a group that was designated as a foreign terror organization by the United States of America. What does this do to international law?
Yeah, I hadn't heard of a sitting president, charged as the head of a narco-terror organization. And just captured, and now, as in the report that you mentioned, about to be tried in the U.S. Mm-hmm. So I think this is a very interesting development. I think a lot of legal experts will weigh in on the legality of the arrest or, the capture, and of course the legality of the entire proceedings. So we would have to see in the coming weeks how this would be justified before international law. And of course, if ever the U.S. court, would have to satisfy itself that it has jurisdiction over this case. And of course, domestically in the U.S., how this will be, how this will be accepted by, if ever this goes to the Supreme Court in the U.S., if there will be challenges to this matter. We would have to see the relations between the President Donald Trump and of course the justice system in the U.S., the Supreme Court, which in some cases they don't necessarily agree on some things, including the imposition of the tariffs. And I think this case would be another potential touch point between the executive and the judiciary. So we would have to see how this will pan out.
You think the American judiciary could disagree with the American president because American president will say that this is a matter of national security and he did it in the interest of America's national security. It was an executive decision that he has carried out without any approval of the Congress. Do you think Nicolas Maduro can plead that he's actually effectively a prisoner of war who's been abducted and not captured by the Americans? There are some very interesting legal aspects that can happen. But how do you think this case will proceed? Will America, in your assessment, now just treat him as a narco trafficker or a terrorist, as they call him?
Yeah, so a lot of this development opened like a Pandora's box, in terms of legal, I don't know, gray areas, how this will be defended, this decision, and whether the U.S. judicial system will be on board with this decision, whether they will try Maduro and on what basis, and of course this would have far-reaching implications to other countries, that a leader, a sovereign leader of another country would be spirited away from his, home country and be tried extraterritorially in another country. And that decision, whether the U.S. court, a U.S. court would accept this, well, we're not so sure. It's very unlikely that, the U.S. court were consulted before this development took place. But this would land on their lap, and how they would react, how they would decide on this, will have implications beyond the U.S. Judicial system.
Right. Now, in the last 24, 36 hours, Nicolas Maduro had made it clear that he is willing to negotiate with the Americans. And he said that if the American oil companies want to come and do business and extract Venezuelan oil, then he would, of course, welcome them back. Because Donald Trump, it appeared that his entire reason as to why he carried out with these attacks and what has happened in the last 6 hours is because he was upset that Venezuela had nationalized its oil back in the 1970s and then again in the 1990s. It had expelled most American oil companies except for Chevron, which still was operating out of Venezuela. But Donald Trump was not willing to sit down for any negotiations with the Venezuelans and get American companies back into Venezuela. Why do you think he chose to bring about regime change than to work with Nicolas Maduro?
Well, that's very hard to answer. But so far, as you have correctly say, President Maduro tried to appease, tried to find a formula where he'll be able to stay in government, and tried to extend an olive branch, tried to make some kind of concessions rhetorically to the U.S. But it seems, after amassing that naval armada off the coast of Venezuela since September, I think the U.S. was really raring to get into action. And, before this development, President Trump already said that, certain countries like Iran or Turkey, it could be places where President Maduro can go. That President Trump is showing the door for President Maduro to exit voluntarily. So I think that the decision was already made at that point. And so no amount of effort on the part of President Maduro to make concessions in the U.S. President Trump seems to find this too late and maybe unappealing.
And we were talking about BRICS a little while back, and what is interesting is that in the last 2 decades, China, through its trade relations, has made for itself a bigger role economically in some of these nations, such as Brazil, etc., who are willing to do business with China. Now, do you think that was something that was concerning for the Americans, who, as part of their Monroe Doctrine, do not want any other foreign power to try and create a space for themselves in Latin America? Some a region that the Americans view as their own backyard, where they want to keep everyone else out. Do you think that has played a role in what has transpired today?
Yes, I think we could see this development also as a way for President Trump to really showcase the brand of foreign policy, especially in relation to the Western Hemisphere, that no other foreign power would have so much economic and eventually leverage this economic influence to have some kind of diplomatic or political clout over Latin America, which in President Trump's U.S. view is, its backyard. And so, as you have said, decades of Chinese investment, commodities trade, made China the emerging top trade partner for countries in Latin America, especially those exporting energy, agricultural produce, and mineral ores like Venezuela, Brazil, and of course the concern on the part of the U.S. that this would eventually erode or diminish Washington's appeal, as a trade partner or even a security partner for the region. I think here in Venezuela they showed that the U.S. remains the force to reckon with as far as this backyard or region is concerned.
Now, do you think Donald Trump has set a new template, if we can call it the Trump doctrine, of how he wants to deal with leaders that he does not personally like? So can we expect that this is a tactic that Donald Trump would like to replicate in other places, such as, like, let's say, Iran, where the Americans would also perhaps like to see a regime change?
Well, I think the concern on the part of other regimes or countries with which President Trump, it's not to the liking of President Trump. Iran is certainly of the countries aside from Venezuela who have a lot of anxiety right now after this recent attacks. Prior to that, we have already seen bunker busting airstrikes on supposed Iranian nuclear sites, and so, and of course, the rhetoric about the intervention should Iran use force against protesters, so this kind of rhetoric and behavior that for many would deem as a intervention in the domestic affairs of another country. So I think this kind of standard or template is something that a lot of observers would find very disturbing.
Interesting. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Pitlow, for joining us from Hong Kong, getting us that perspective. For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.